there's a concept called the wounded healer.
Yes.
And the most powerful shamans, magician, and healers are the broken ones.
Yeah.
As children in these tribes either had a near-death experience or a disease or some trauma opens the channels of communication, and they become the shaman of the tribe. And they heal not in spite of their wounds, but because of their wounds. They're in so much pain, they understand the pain of others,
Yes.
and they address them, but it eventually destroys them. And there's traditions in circumpolar shaman tribes. Shamans in North and South, they end up like Elvis. They end up as fat drug addicts, sick people, just there. And the tribe's like, well, that's your job. You're the one who has to heal us and entertain us and advise us. And the shaman's like, I know, that's my job. Burden. And they die. And Elvis was carrying that burden. He was a wounded healer, a shaman. And I have other theories. I try to approach it from Jungian, alchemical, different theories. We'll never know. It's a mystery. Happy heresies and welcome to the desert of the real. My name is Miguel Connor and I am your Pompatus of Gnosis. And I'm sure you've noticed a little different intro. Thought I'd put some promos from my Elvis book, The Occult Elvis, that includes my appearance on Gaia TV on Open Minds with the wonderful Regina Meredith. And I think the themes will resonate today because there are parallels with the shamanism, the wounded healer, and those who talk to the spirit world. So, yes, no coincidences. But again, happy to see everybody on this Mercury day who is joining in live. As always, if you have any questions, please super chat them so that we can get to them. But yes, today I am honored, as always, to be joined by my friend and an individual whose work I always find rewarding and mind expanding, and that is Ola Wolny. Ola, thank you very much for coming back on the show.
Welcome, everyone, and hello, Miguel, to you again. Thank you so much for having me back. Very, very thrilled. Love the intro. I think that probably I would love to have a chat offline with you. That might be quite interesting. And yes, absolutely, I would love to dive a little bit deeper into the topic that you mentioned in the intro as well. Again, a different perspective.
Of course, there are many perspectives, even though the goal is always the same, as they say. And yes, always great to chat with you. It's been a while. Last time I saw you, you joined us at the Astronosis conference, and I had to laugh because we just left town last weekend, and as we're driving back, we were from Wisconsin. My kids decided they were looking at the moon and going, why is it disappearing? Why is it appearing? It's appearing there. And I remember after picking you up at the airport here, you were doing the same thing. Because yes, the moon, it appears over here, then it's orange and it's larger and and the kids were very suspicious. And of course, my wife agrees with your ideas, had to explain them. This is not a good thing, right?
Well, there you go. Kids will pick up on the false better than the adults. So I think your kids are amazing. I've met them in person and no wonder, no joke.
Yeah. My son Sebastian had to go to the computer and check it out, and he still didn't understand it. And of course, the moon is an enigma. It's even from a scientific perspective, it confuses all scientists today. Why it's the only round object in the galaxy. It's hollow. The craters don't make any sense when it comes to astro. I mean, there's so much about it that it all points to some sort of artificial station, right? I don't know what else to say.
Yeah. I think that if the science could let go of certain stance and sort of certain anchors that, of course, are imposed on purpose, right? So that we stick to a certain narrative and we stay inside the cage. We have the answers. We have the answers for so much. There's no need for that much exploration. It's all a theater anyway. So yeah.
It all is theater. And with us too, we are glad to be joined by Graham Pong. Graham, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing very well, Miguel. I don't think the moon is the only thing that confuses scientists these days.
Yes,
No.
everything.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing from Olna. I like going back to Inanna. I find her much more fascinating than her later incarnation than Ishtar. So, tag.
She's the primordial one. Awesome. Well, again, if you have any questions for Ola, please super chat them. As always, please support Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio in any way you can. Like, subscribe. I have a donation link on Stripe in the show notes. Join the Patreon, whatever you can do. I can't do it without you. And let's keep growing this red pill cafeteria, oh, you spiritual entrepreneurs and veterans of 1,000 psychic wars. Let's spread that gnosis. Well, before we get to the underworld, Ola, I like you put a post yesterday on Facebook, a very pointed and passionate post about what is going on today with seekers, and again, how they're doing it all wrong. From, like you said, doing all theater with mantras and rituals, to going down rabbit holes to look for conspiracies and all that. And you say, yeah, even though seeking in the matrix can get caught up in a matrix within a matrix, right? Tell us about this post you put up and why you decided to do that on Facebook.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, we last time we met a year ago, and well, I think that I like to pop up here and there, and probably that's all I do when I pop up. I just stick the hornet net right in there. But yeah, so if anybody wants to have a look, find me on Facebook and read the post. I don't think I said anything. I don't think there's any major revelation there. I think it's just something that I sort of put together in one place, but it does call out certain things. So a year went by and I realized certain things, mostly to do with the fact that talking about certain things and informing people is actually not doing that much. Mm-hmm. We are actually not really moving. Because even if you tell people the exact answers, I don't think there's either a capacity or there is something there that continues to keep people looping. So even though the answers might be right in front of them, and I've done it, I've given answers through my interviews, I've given answers through my webinars. If somebody wants to check out that content, I managed to exercise some serious discipline, and I put all my interviews in one place on my YouTube. It's not really a YouTube channel. It's more like a place where you can find everything. And also you can have a look at my webinars. But the point is that it's not enough. Apparently, it keeps people looping, and it keeps people looping. Because, and you see, this is where I want to really touch on what you said in the intro, that the shamans, the wounded healers, right, the people that were standing on the edge, they were standing between worlds in the indigenous cultures, in the ancient times as well. I mean, we can call them shamans, but we're going back to the Gnostics. Gnostics did not speak any different language. It was just slightly repackaged. We're talking the same.
Right.
So I would love to explore this a little bit more today. Hopefully we can manage, because you see, I have sort of gotten to the same place where I see that that telling people, even if it's on a silver platter, is not doing that much, because they haven't come to the edge. And you actually do not need to become a shaman, or you don't need to be a shaman or want to be a shaman to take that journey. This is the only journey of real contact where if you survive, because I mean, I'm sorry, but in shamanic traditions, these things were not safe, they were not comfy, they were not pretty. If you would get to the edge, you would be hit by contact. Contact with the raw field that comes to you in all sorts of forms. And yes, you mentioned trauma. Trauma could be a catalyst, but it's not ultimately sort of the thing that transforms you. It could be a catalyst, but very often what happens is contact with that raw field, with that raw aspect, makes that mimic that we are all infected with, and trauma is just part of that mimic. Right. It literally makes it collapse. It makes it have no oxygen to live on. And this is why a person transforms. And this is why in the old traditions, if you wanted to truly awaken, you had to make a real contact. You had to go to the edge and you had to jump. Not literally, right? But we know what I mean. So there's something here about taking people to the edge that's necessary, and talking about it is not enough. So what I'm doing is I'm planting something here, okay? Because I'm still talking, but I'm not only talking, because I have, since last time we've met, I have changed a lot around my Lofoten getaways as well. Perhaps I should change the word getaway to gateway. Maybe that would be more like it. Yeah. Never been a typo, but maybe should have. And what I've kind of moved towards is not so much talking and teaching about it, but making people face it, taking people to the edge.
But what do you mean by the edge? I'm assuming, I mean, as some have called it, the crossroads, the underworld, obviously in shamanistic traditions, the shaman has to suffer even in the spirit world. Sometimes he gets dismembered and put back together. Osiris is an ancient shamanistic story. And like you said, all the Gnostics did was repackage this ancient Egyptian shamanism and put it more in the language of the time. But what is this edge? I mean, obviously, what keeps me going from the edge is always going to be the programming and this fear of change. Because sometimes I change because I'm in so much pain, because part of me is rejecting. It knows it's lying to itself, and it comes up as pain, depression, anxiety. And finally I said, I'm in so much pain, I am going to jump off the edge where I am just free. Yeah. Is that it?
Absolutely. That is exactly it. So what is the edge? The edge is the place where you get to, not by choosing, not by mantras, not so much by, it's not a result of a process. It's not a result of a healing or a therapy. It is literally because your inner conditions are such that there is no other option. You get literally, this is very much why very often most people who undergo, I call it collapse, who undergo the collapse, they never chose the collapse. They've never sort of consciously, this is not a result of a spiritual path. This is not a result of a pursuit. And that's the interesting thing, because most of the people watching this are, or, they think they're on some kind of path, and they are looping because nothing's happening. It's, there's more knowledge maybe, but okay, is more knowledge really sufficient? Is it doing something? Not really. So the collapse and the edge is actually not about what you gain. It's about what dies in you. And what does it mean, what dies in you? And please do not misinterpret that as some kind of ego death, because that is the psychology kind of version here. And I think the Gnostics got very misunderstood on that front as well, because everybody's talking about the ego death. in a psychology context, and that's not what this is. The death that I'm talking about, and I think that's the death that the Gnostics are talking about as well, and the indigenous people, is the death of the parts of you that are still looping into the matrix, that are still looking for comfort, safety, and gain. So these are, I kind of realized that these are probably the key. The comfort and gain are the key underlying sort of triggers of us being stuck in this matrix, right? Because just what you said earlier, that you've been in situations where you've been taken to the edge, but your programming keeps you from jumping. Well, that's the point. You need to jump. And the jump is so that you can, that programming can collapse, right? Because you have to starve it. So the edge, being taken to the edge, and in the shamanic traditions, why that contact was raw and it was dangerous, because there was no guarantee what's going to happen when you come back. You didn't know what was going to happen. Right now, we are drowning in safe spaces and goddesses and healing and, don't worry about anything. Your spirit guides are here and all this nonsense. This is nonsense. This is nothing to do with anything real. And yes, I am very passionate about it because I'm tired. Because I'm tired of 3 years of nonsense, trying to sort of teach certain things and get people to touch the real, touch the authentic underlying current of what's really in these teachings. And I don't feel that teaching itself is enough. So now I've moved into literally teaming up with the raw terrain. I happen to live here. There is no accident. I was brought here myself, and I was repeatedly collapsed by this place. Literally this whole story. I don't know if we ever spoke about my past of oil and gas, and I don't like to go back there. It's irrelevant. Nobody cares. That doesn't matter. It's just to kind of show you, just to let you know that I never chose to leave oil and gas. If anything, I was, at the time when it was all happening, I was kicked out. I was kicked out of the matrix, as in I was kicked out of the oil and gas corporate kind of world, and I was desperately trying to climb back in, and I was denied. Okay, I mean, this is kind of a sort of flowery language to describe what happened. But the point is, you need to be taken to a place where your whole identity, where your whole belief system, whatever felt safe, is taken away. And not only that, that's not good enough, okay? Because very often what happens in that spot, you are then trying to soft land. So people soft land by trying to, take the spiritual path, trying to give that meaning, trying to kind of replace one loop, the more matrixy one, with another level of the chessboard, as I say, which is another loop, which is another spiritual, perhaps, or any other trauma-based framework. And you're caught back into it again. It's just a different chessboard. So you actually have to land on your ass with no crutch, with no support, not making a story out of it, not trying to understand it, not trying to mythologize it. You just have to literally be stripped. And that's what happened to me, you see, because I come from Eastern Europe. We have a bit of a inferiority syndrome, where as Eastern Europeans, we kind of coming to the West, we very often people feel like we have to prove ourselves. So that was one layer on my account. And another layer was that I was very much in that story of I matter, or I have some value because of my job titles. And that was literally my whole identity, my whole worth. And when that was taken away from me, that wasn't pretty, because you kind of look at yourself and you have to find out who you are without it. And you just you cannot grab a crutch on your way down. You have to literally fall down all the way to the bottom. So, and not just once. That of course, a lot of us could have those stories, but the difference is, or the kind of critical point is, do you in the process try, reach out for safety, try to kind of soft land, or does it really devour you? And that's what happened in the indigenous traditions, right? These people going out there, they didn't necessarily physically went out anywhere, although that also happened. Why? For contact, to contact their own fears, to contact their own traumas, to face them, to not run away from them, but to face them, to be devoured by them. And then what happens? You find out you don't get devoured, because that's just the whole Matrix boohoo, right? So when you starve the narrative, where you unloop the loop, it drops. So there is no ego death per se. This is not about, floating on a cloud, being in bliss and oneness, some nonsense, and having no personality, like some kind of seaweed floating in the ocean. No, that's not the ego death that the Gnostics are talking about. It's about unhooking the Matrix triggers, the way the Matrix, and that includes trauma, and that includes, the comfort gain, the seeking attention, approval, validation, whatnot, love me, need me, want me, etc., all that nonsense, right? All that programming, ugly, necessary.
Really well said indeed, yes. And so you would say this is like a complete alchemical transformation. It's not, I guess, it's not growth, it's not adjustment. It's transforming yourself into a new being.
I would probably say that it's, I think I would personally, I would stay away from the word transform, because that can kind of almost signal that you just leave one identity to enter another. And what I'm speaking about is dying. You need to die, not physically. I mean, of course, that can happen too, but you literally need those aspects of you die. So when I was going through certain things, I had my own traumas, I had my own issues, and all of us probably at some point tried a bit of therapy, a bit of different healing modalities, and I couldn't really understand how is it that at some point I just woke up and it was gone. Whatever that was gone. But it wasn't because of the therapy, and it wasn't because of the healing, and it wasn't because of the affirmations and all that nonsense. It was because I touched something real, and it took from me. It didn't give me, it didn't make me into a different version of me. It just took. It extracted the parasite, as I like to call it, that it's like a parasite. When you extract the parasite, it's not pretty, it's messy, and it's it's not comfy, and there is no healing space or anything like that. You're alone. It's an ugly, messy process, and there's nothing spiritual about it, but you have to be real, you have to be raw, and it doesn't happen because you make an intention for that to happen. It literally devours you when you are the most scared of exactly that, and that's exactly what you need.
That's really well said. Yeah, I can relate. Even the excuses. What do you think, Graham? Do you have a question about what Ola is saying, or a remark?
I track almost 100% with what she's saying. Slight difference that I have is I don't necessarily see a problem with preferring comfort over discomfort. It's the choice of pursuing pleasure over simple comforts that I see where the problem lies. And I see a lot of what she's talking about is that liminal space in between those complementary opposites, like order and chaos. And that's where the, between the genders, between the male and female, that's where the new offspring comes from. And I see that's the sort of concept that she's trying to address and bring to people's attention that they just can't seem to get, regardless of how much she beats them over the head with it. How am I doing, Ola?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just making a note here for myself to get back to you on that one. I think that in terms of the comfort, um, probably we are just slightly off on terminology. I don't mean comfort in a sort of context that, you know, we should be giving up everything and living in scarcity. That's nonsense too. That we were never designed for that. By comfort, I literally mean the attention seeking, the validation, people seeking kind of whatever emotional crutch that they need. And this world is very much built on that. People needing to feel good, but not as a sort of clean source of that, but as in something in them is still empty and it's seeking comfort to feel better. And that might be, you know, fill me up, validate me, love me, understand me, give me your time, save me, rescue me, etc., etc. That I mean by comfort. So this is just a way to sort of capture one of the I would say main issues that this matrix is literally using and utilizing to keep people looped.
Yeah, 100%. All those ads that are telling you you're nothing if you don't have that latest, newest product and run out to get it right now. No, we're very much on the same page. And that's part of this process where we have the same ideas. We're just trying to find our right words to try to express it to each other. And that's part of the challenge in human communication. So thanks for the opportunity so we can clarify and get on the same page, Ola.
Yeah, wonderful. Right. Thank you. And well said. So, but what advice do you have? Let's say people are there, they're asking, they want to go on the edge, but they live in different parts of the world. What advice do you have for them? What do they do to reach that edge, to go that edge? I mean, because we live in a world of all these rituals and gurus and promises. Yeah. What do you do? Do something that scares you? Go on the edge of death?
Well, you see, the issue with that is that the edge, you know, like I say, the edge is not where you arrived by a healing process or a therapy or an intention. It's not how it works. I would actually suggest that pursuing those routes, you're going closer towards the matrix than out of it. So I would say leave that. I would honestly, and I said that in a post, so you know, this is probably why the post might have been considered controversial, because I told you, and I've been saying that, to be fair, I've been saying that for a long time, that people should leave everything, including me. Do not listen to me anymore. Do not listen to anything. But when I say that, I literally mean when I say focus on you. But you know, focusing on you could also be misunderstood, because that could go into, again, deeper spiritual practice or some sort of deeper discipline. And again, you are not even touching the real deal, right? When I say focus on you, I literally mean looping in this healing mantras, you know, chasing podcasts, chasing rabbit holes, etc. You're just doing what Matrix wants you to do. They want you to be occupied. They never want you to touch the real. They don't want you to focus on you. They want you to chase. So all those paths are actually not that's not the path. That's the illusion of a path. So the real contact, the real edge comes, it's somewhere else. You know, part of my process was I happened to arrive here, and you know what, you don't have to come here. That's not the only way. I absolutely don't say that. But what happened to me was that I was exposed to raw field, to raw nature. And by that I mean that there are certain places around the world that still carry that original signal, something pre-matrix, something pre-system overlay. If you can contact that, This is why the shamans, right, they would go on a vision quest. They would go
Right.
out into the wilderness. Why? Because they would be looking for that raw signal, that contact with the raw terrain, not just nature. This was not about, finding plants or trees. This was about being out there, not really with an intention, just being and seeing what happens. You're going to get hit. What does it mean? Well, not physically. Something is going to make an impression. There's going to be a force contact out there if you are exposed long enough. If something in your architecture, your inner architecture, is already unstable, you're going to get hit. This is why, for example, in many traditions, they would go out into the cold. They would be hungry. They would be sitting out there, without sort of changing position, right? So why? Because all those conditions take you out of a comfort zone. So they would almost try to induce some kind of experience. Can that be done? I think it depends. If there is already a crack in your architecture, then it can. If there isn't, then probably not. Another way of sort of trying to get that crack into you is literally with a contact with someone who has that raw signal installed into them, who already has been through the collapse themselves, and there is no bullshit anymore. Why? Because that person will see through you. That person is raw. That person just speaks the truth, and they do not, there's a lot of people that can be harsh. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
Harsh is one thing. Another thing is contact with either the raw field or raw signal within someone. I don't know a better language. I'm sorry if this is too engineering, but hey, that's my old heritage that I collapsed as well. Probably still lives. But it's literally what you need is someone who will not play back to you the loop that you are expecting.
Right.
So if you want to meet and you want to talk again about your trauma, or you want to play the victim, or you want to play the one who always ends up with this or that, and suddenly there is no audience, suddenly the reaction is different. It's in shamanic tradition that would have been called a field strike. So you receive a strike, as then you get hit, and few of those over a longer time, and the structure starts to shake. Your structure starts to shake, because suddenly you meet void. You do not meet mirror. You do not meet someone who's giving you the reaction that you want, that you were hoping for, validating you, giving you what you need. No, you meet void. You meet nothing. And suddenly whatever story, myth, or nonsense and excuses that you told yourself, suddenly they have nothing to live off. There is no oxygen. Starvation.
And
I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are in the moment. You are there. You are, yeah. I don't know how else to describe it. I have felt it, but of course, I still have work. I mean, we all have work with our programming. The matrix isn't going to stop just because you've touched something good, right? It's it will change the code and realign and try to get you in other ways.
Absolutely. So this whole work that I'm talking about, and this is precisely what they talked about in the shamanic traditions, the true shamanic traditions, not the shamanic traditions that are being sold out right now, the feel-good factor, drum journeys, etc. But the real stuff, it was about pulling the hooks out of you so that the matrix has nothing to sort of loop onto you. So you remain sort of clean, naked. This is the nakedness. This is the same nakedness that Inanna is talking about before her journey to the underworld, right? That the 7 gates, she's undressing. She's not undressing. This is not a fashion show. She is removing hooks, okay? Mm-hmm. And it's raw and it's not pretty. And that whole journey in the underworld, not pretty, right? So, and it's not a journey into the subconscious. Do not get misled by that interpretation either, because the underworld is not the sort of psychology terrain. This is a misinterpretation, but it is certainly about death and undoing. You cannot leave this matrix the way you sort of operate right now, right? This is why Mary Magdalene talks about if you do not resurrect in life, after death, too late, right? Too late.
Exactly. And as you've said before, the underworld is the place where the Matrix, maybe we can't describe it, but we know that the Matrix has no power there. And but at the same time, isn't the underworld really a feminine domain, or what would you say about that? I mean, the original myths are a feminine power going down in there.
Absolutely. So in the original traditions, the underworld is a feminine domain. This is why whenever you see, you mentioned Osiris before, right? As in that kind of shamanic context, but also Jesus, but also Dumuzi, right? Whenever a man is attempting to take a journey into the underworld, right? There is an element of that. Or perhaps should we call it the resurrection? Whenever a man is undergoing resurrection, there is a woman present. So all these men had a wife or someone with them, right? Because we also have stories in ancient Greece and Dionysus that the woman was not his wife, but there is a woman present. Why? Because the woman is the one who's walking the threshold. She's walking the underworld. This is the domain of women, not because we are better or anything of that kind, but because of the sort of the way we are literally constructed physically. We're talking the hormonal aspects, the biological aspects. We happen to carry certain architecture, which almost by default makes us sort of become the shamans. But of course, a lot of women today, we're not shamans just by birth. We need to become the shamans, right? So there is obviously an element of collapse, but there is the fact that the woman holds the portal. Woman has the womb. That's the portal. There's the biology of hormones, the secretions, which are the sort of substances on the verge between the worlds. So that's the difference. But absolutely, there's a woman that guides the rites of reclaiming your soul or resurrection. The journey into the underworld for a man is always accompanied by a woman. This is why back in the days, a man would always have to have a consort.
Yeah, very interesting. That's why for Orpheus to be successful, he had to have Eurynomy come back with him. But, obviously in the myth, he messed up. And probably why in a lot of traditions, when the shaman goes into the spiritual world, he dresses up as a woman. Some say to fool the places or to be more successful. So.
Right, and then even such little things that survived until now, right? If you look at the Pope or the all those religious figures, the outfits, right? They are wearing sort of robes that are more like feminine type of robes rather than these are not sort of trousers and shirts, right? This is a certain attire that's also meant to signal that.
I was going to jumping in here. You had me challenging my mythology memory here, and I came up with one that I think I'm curious if it's an exception or if there's some other explanation, and that's Heracles, because he didn't have a feminine companion when he went down to get Cerberus and return him. So I didn't know if that would fit in there or if that's some sort of exception that needs further exploration. Tag.
Did you mean Hercules? Is that okay?
Yeah, Hercules, Heracles. I went with the Greek rather than the Roman.
Sure. Yeah. So what I would say about Hercules, and of course, in a context of the 12 labors of Hercules, right? When you look into mythology, there is a very strong polarity between the male figures and the female figures. Very, very few female figures get spared in mythology, as in they do not end up with the marketing of being a, demon or prostitute, etc. But the males, the men, very often get, well, all the glory, right? They are the heroes. And Hercules specifically, to me, represents something, or he's sort of casted to represent something slightly different here. The 12 labors are not an accident here. And please do pay attention to the number, because it's 12, not 13, not 11, 12, like the 12 zodiac signs, right? And the 12 that repeats well, across the mythology and history. So the 12 labors, starting with, well, it depends obviously on the interpretation, but one of the labors is him doing what? Killing a woman, right? So Medusa, Gorgona. This is something slightly different is going on here. He's killing the lion. He's going after the women, after the virgin. Why? Because these things represent something. The lion, the Nemean lion that he kills, or maybe just puts to sleep, represents something in men, something in males. It represents the sensitivity. It represents the empathy, which has been sort of killed off in men in general, partially through the intervention into our DNA. So certain functions have been switched off, and all that gets packaged and placed into the myth. But of course, it's going to be packaged in a certain way, right? So it's not the most obvious way. The same with the Gorgona. The sort of the killing there, and portraying the woman with snakes on her hair and being absolutely a monster. This is not an accident. This is, again, this whole narrative that this race that came here and set up this matrix, the Archons, right? They have been targeting women. They have been specifically targeting women. Why? Well, I think we talked about it last time we met, that women have a very special function. So placing men as heroes, especially when it comes to using the club to kill a woman. What is the club? All these phallic symbols, they are suggesting something here. They are suggesting the fact that there's been a certain targeting that happened, and it's specifically coming from the distorted masculine energy, or perhaps masculine or the males against women. So I think this is how we should be more looking to the story of Hercules. The myth here, I would say that this is probably the main story for me, at least. That's the main takeaway. This is that the fact that there are 12 labors of how the Archons successively implanted their power and sort of changed certain things within us, even physically, on a genetic, on a DNA level, in order to install this matrix. And what sort of field conditions are required, such as dominance of men and servitude of women? What conditions are required for this matrix to hold?
Fascinating. No, that is an interpretation that I had never considered, and I will definitely have to re-go over the myth with that in mind. I was always, I've always kind of liked the idea of Hercules as the Greek everyman, and that's why he was so popular. Where he's basically almost his 12 labors are sort of a ancient variation on Joseph Campbell's monomyth and the hero cycle. And it was sort of like the original version of that one. And it's sort of the things you face as you're going through the life rebirth, like you're talking about, where you go through that dark night of the soul. Or one of the things you have to do is clean out the stables and clean out all those years of detritus that's built up, and a lot of different battles you have to face on your way, back to something resembling a life. So, no, as I always say, multiple interpretations fit over the same myth, and they're both the truth. So, thank you, Ola.
I think that what I would add to that is that you see, I think the issue with me, for me, has always been around the fact that I come through the lens of feminine alchemy. If you actually look into feminine alchemy teachings deeper, these are teachings that predate every other tradition. These are the teachings that go back before everything else was derived from it through the process of sort of corruption, subversion, and then our interpretation, including of mythology, has been very much based on that subverted, corrupted version, very often put forward by patriarchy in its ready form for consumption, because myths have been tampered with. The myths that have survived very often until now are already tampered with. There's already an inversion in there. So I would be very careful about interpretations and sort of making sure that, the interpretation is rooted in the original story, and that we do have insight into the alchemical context, which actually most scholars don't. Most people with whom I talk out there, most people that are referenced as authorities on the subject, have no idea about alchemy, about feminine alchemy, which predates all teachings. So what are you rooted in? Then you are not rooted in the original tradition. You're rooted in some kind of derived form that was created millennia or centuries later. So that was already inverted. That was already corrupted. So to me, it's about making sure that if we are going to interpret something, are we interpreting from the original teaching or the original understanding and decoding, or are we interpreting from a version that has been put forward and presented on purpose?
True that.
No, I thank you for that. And again, I go with a more pluriform basis for truth, where just because one is true doesn't mean another can't also be true at the same time. So, no, I thank you on that one, and you've given me a lot to study and integrate.
And I know the myth of Hercules also could be seen as a solar myth. So it's different than the underworld myth. It's about the Zodiac and all that. And, Hercules is the sun, like Samson is the sun in the thing, and Delilah is the moon.
This is the issue that I have with sort of, there are many versions of the truth, really. So why? I mean, isn't the truth the truth? Or if it has versions, then I don't think it's the truth anymore. So I think that we need to be careful, because a lot of those, for example, Jesus is the sun, etc., or a lot of those others mythologies also having the sort of main figure, and then that being linked to the sun, and there's I would say that there are bits of truth in there, but again, unless you go down to the fundamental sort of tradition that all of this not only originates from, but on purpose has been inverted. But if people don't know about the tradition, and when I say alchemy, I know what's going on. A lot of people out there think that they know what I'm talking about, and no, you don't, because you're thinking about the alchemy of turning lead into gold and all that good stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. Feminine alchemy is the oldest tradition, based on literally the very biology and what comes from that, as the sort of the biology of a body, of a woman's body specifically, because it is feminine alchemy. It's the fact that we used to be sort of operating before, way before this matrix, we used to be connected across different sort of dimensions. We had access to certain spaces that we have lost as a result of this matrix. A woman has a energetic and even physical construct of a tree of life. What does that mean? It means that the woman is connected across 3 wombs: the cosmic womb, her womb, our womb here in this reality, and the underworld, the womb of the earth in the underworld. And there is a very specific reason for that kind of architecture, so that a woman would be the one, just because that's how we are built, we would be the one, the conduit for abundance, the conduit for literally everything. You know, the land of milk and honey, that would have been the woman's job to provide, right? The land of milk and honey. This is why back in all the traditions, when a king took over the kingdom, he would need to have a consort to ensure the fertility of the land, because that would go through the woman. That would go through the fact that she's connected with the land, she's connected with the cosmic womb. Literally no cosmic principles, no symbology, no, you know, philosophies necessary here. We're talking literally the raw original design of this world. And that's and the alchemy that I talk about there is the alchemy as a result of a woman's hormonal system and the secretions that the body produces, thanks to which certain things can happen, such as pregnancy. But that's just one aspect of it. So just to make that distinction.
No, I agree. But don't you think sometimes myths have functions, like fairy tales have functions to deal with different parts of our psyche or our lives? Or
well, I think this is very dangerous. Where you see, this is the thing. There's a lot of that kind of notion out there that fairy tales or myths are just to do with our psyche. That's another matrix implementation. That's like an implant sitting there telling you, look over there, don't look into the original. I've looked through that, and it's, you see, again, it doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't matter what I say, because feminine alchemy doesn't need me to defend itself. It is the original teaching. So anybody who cares to dig deep enough will arrive at the same place. So you see, this whole notion of psychologizing mythology is another matrix trap. They want you to think that this is about psychology, so that you don't dig deep enough to discover perhaps what we've been talking about at the beginning of this program, right?
No.
So I would say that it is a little bit of a shaky ground if you don't know how to navigate. And of course, matrix wants you to think this is about psychology, but as I always say, the myths, the fairy tales, all those kind of stories, they are not just stories. They are not a good night extravaganza. They are literally the truth about what happened here. It's just that we have been so misguided and misled away from the truth, from even spotting the truth, that it's unbelievable, right? It's literally inconceivable that the fairy tales could hold the truth of what happened here. But it's not just the truth of what happened here. We already are staring at the answer about what needs to be done. For example, going back to the shamanic tradition, why is there always somewhere in the shamanic tradition there is fire, right? There's the element of fire, and also the element of fire, often replaced by the spirit or light especially, shows up in pretty much all religions, right? All teachings. So what is fire? Why nobody's talking about the fire? And if we are talking about the fire, we're talking about passion, some purification, but all this is very symbolic. All this is very often kind of psychologized.
Right.
And I would like to strip the psychology from it, and I would like to speak about it in a shamanic context, in a shamanic way. And I'm not the only one, because my demolition crew, the Gnostics, they have been talking about the fire as well.
Right.
Gospel of Thomas talks about the fire. Gospel of Mary Magdalene talks about the fire. The Apocalypse of Peter talks about the fire, and they tell us literally what the fire is, not in some symbolic way, not in some kind of philosophy way, but they talk about the fire. So think about it, the fire being something original inside of you. Let's call it a signal, a raw signal inside of you that burns through all the mimic. And when I say burns through all the mimic, what I mean by the mimic are the matrix hooks, are the way this matrix, through the programming, traumas, etc., the conditioning, is trying to hook onto you. That inner fire, which all of those gospels are referencing, is literally talking about something raw, original in you before the overlay. So contact with that fire burns through all the illusions, burns through, and by the illusions, I literally mean whatever the programming, whatever the conditioning, the traumas. You don't need trauma work. You need that narrative to be starved, just like everything else. It's just a program. It's just a program. So that fire, or in shamanic traditions, that would have been also the part of that initiation, that you need to be brought to the edge and do not flinch. Flinching means looking for a crutch, right? Flinching means developing a new identity, a new version of yourself, rather than letting what needs to die just die.
Yeah, well said.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I can think this year of times where I've been on the edge, and I can think of times, Ola, that I have flinched. But now I know when I'm flinching. I'm like, I'm there, and then I'm like, oh, but a little bit of safety. But I'll be a little bit more mature, but I'll have a little, but yeah. I mean, can you blame people for wanting safety, even though it eventually becomes very painful and you lose yourself and all that?
Well, I mean, of course, I can understand the sort of psychological need behind it, right? I mean, we all like the safety and comfort. The issue is there's no freedom in there. There is no freedom out of this matrix in safety. There's no sort of freedom in avoiding what possesses you, right? You, at some point, you're gonna have to face it. You're gonna have to let it get in your face, try to devour you. And if it does, well, then whatever is left out of you, that's probably the only raw, true, authentic part. And that's the point.
That's the point. Yeah, it's real.
That's real. That's real. I'm not saying, that's why I'm saying, you see, those initiations, they were not comfy, they were not easy, they were raw, they were dangerous, they would leave you a totally different person, but that was the point.
It is. I mean, my last 2 ayahuasca experiences, and again, they're good because my uncle is very good shaman. He knows how to guide people. Oh, hello, cat. But they were brutal. It was 2 or 3 hours of just, like you said, I felt I was being eaten alive by demons. Like they were just tearing, and then suddenly this light comes out. So I understand it. I do understand it. I wanted to get to a super chat, Ola. This kind of, it kind of ties in, and that's from Chasing Mounds Builder. Thank you very much for that. And he asks, can we leave breadcrumbs to fall on the path through the process? Oh, there's a myth. Or would that be counterproductive to the purpose? Must it be full collapse? Do we arrive, or are we to continue this?
Well, I'm not sure if I understand this, but I'm going to try my best. If I understand the breadcrumbs, is that the safety net?
Yeah, little reminders, or I don't know.
So, I mean, what do I tell you? What do I tell you? You know, if collapse is not brutal, then it's not collapse. Then you've just dressed into something else. Then it's just a theater. and you don't choose. The good news is you don't choose. You do not choose if you are being collapsed. The only thing that can happen is that you are going to
It's gonna eat my ear.
you're going to redress whatever happened into new robes. And that's the danger. That's what the danger lives, because it's not stripping you. You're literally reaching out for scaffolding to land, to soft land, when you actually have to hit the ground, right? Safety is not an option. It's not meant to be nice. It's not meant to be comfy. It's meant to be real. And, again, this is not a process that happens because you choose it, because you tomorrow decide with an intention that you're going to undergo a collapse. Collapse from what? It's collapse happens when you don't really expect it. It happens because somebody or something stops feeding the very loop that's inside of you, the very program, the very narrative, the lie, the sacred lie, the excuse. It just doesn't land anymore, right? So whatever the loop was, whatever story you would tell, and you would get the, oh, I'm so sorry, oh, it really happened to you, oh, that's terrible, and suddenly you don't get that. You don't choose that. You don't choose that. So that's probably all I can say. I think it's that the circumstances will not necessarily let you choose that.
Yeah, I think you answered the question pretty well here. But at the same time, I'm sure that's a fear, right? When you touched at something real, Ola, when you went to the edge, did it, like you said, you already leaving your former profession, but did it mean, that's what people worry, did it mean that Ola had to lose connections with her family, with her culture, with everything? Or, I mean, I'm sure you still, how did your life change? Because we have our social circles, our things like that,
Absolutely. Absolutely good question. So the short answer is yes. Wait a minute. The version of me that they knew from back then is gone. Do I have to cut people off? No, but I am not going to enter a role so that they can meet me where they knew me. So they can meet me on my new terms, right? This is me minus the fancy job, the fancy title, and other nonsense. Yeah. Don't like it? Tough. Not my issue. Yeah, not my problem. So you don't have to cut anyone off per se, but I don't know, because every process is different, right? Perhaps your process could be more volatile, or perhaps it will leave bridges burned. I don't know. But all I'm saying is that it's not about what you do in the external environment. It's about what happens in the internal architecture. And then you just navigate from that. Never make a step back. Never go and make yourself smaller to fit interactions that you used to have. If you do that, then you're back in the programming. Then clearly you are acting out of comfort. You're acting out of safety, right? So for example, I just had the last 2 weeks, I had my parents over for a visit, and that was interesting because my mom has never been here. The 8 years that I live up here in the north, my mom has never been here. And me and my mom, probably like everybody, right? Because with the parents, we have the most interesting matrix loops. So, my mom is one of those last standing fortresses, trying to, still believing somewhere deep inside that I'm going to, come back on the right path, as in come back and rejoin oil and gas and just live how I should, right? Not this nonsense. And so either I can pretend in interactions with her, or just avoid difficult questions, or I can just be myself. And that's what I've been. That's what I've been. It's not comfortable. It's not comfortable for her. It's okay for me because this is me, right? But I know that she has been moments of her little strikes and, being on the edge because the way she wants the world to look is now clashing when she meets me, because I'm not playing the game anymore. I'm not playing her game anymore. So you see, there's a bit of a domino effect as well.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. It's like, what's the old saying by Ram Dass that I love? He says, if you think enlightened, spend the holidays with your family. Because then you find out how much programming is still there, how you turn into the little girl, a little boy in front of your parents and cousins. And it's the last line. It really is. And it makes sense, right? We grow up to mimic our parents so that we can survive, right?
Right.
Animals follow the mom into the woods. And so it's the most powerful mimicking. But our parents, like you said, through generations, through when the Archons attacked and changed our DNA, all parents are mimicking the Matrix from thousands of years.
Absolutely. But that's, it only takes one, right, within the group, within the family, to sort of stop playing the game, and it dissolves a lot.
Exactly.
But you have to, it needs to be done from a true place of that kind of contact and collapse, not from a place of being a rebel, not from a place of just being difficult, not from a place of wanting to keep peace or whatever. It literally needs to be the fact that your inner architecture changed.
Exactly, well said. And when you talk about, I just mentioned DNA, you mentioned DNA. When did they change that? But DNA is something that's part of our physical body. We can't change it, can we? Even though it's been corrupted? Because I'm like, what do we do?
I would say what I think happened. I actually talk about it a little bit in my last episode, I think on Stellify podcast. But what happened with the DNA? You see, these beings, these Archons, they are master engineers, right? They with their technology. I mean, come on, they created the firmament. They captured the planets and made them sort of harvest the energy in a certain way, right? So they have the technology that we can't even comprehend. What I've seen, because I've done a little bit of looking into the DNA, and also I've looked into work of a woman who used to work with vaccines, but she's left that. She was specifically working on the DNA, and she's done her own research on the DNA. And it's funny enough, because there are certain messages that you can decode through numerology that are written into the DNA, and very much you can decode messages that are linking the DNA interventions to the Archons. They literally coded certain phrases into our DNA. So you can watch that episode. You can find out a little bit more, or you can watch some of my webinars. But the point being is the technology that they have is that they do not need to literally using a scalpel dig in every single person to change that. They sort of run certain codes, and I would say they switched, or perhaps they slightly tweaked the very architecture of the DNA, which is also coded in the Bible. The whole story of Eve meeting the snake and then having a conversation, and the serpent, of course, telling the truth, opposed to God. And then at the end, what does Yahweh do? He casts them out, Adam and Eve, out of the Eden. The snake also gets there is a consequence for the snake. What is that story? That is actually part of the coding of what they did with the DNA. The serpent that is now going to sort of move very slowly, that's the link to the mitochondrial DNA. So they have slowed down certain vortices of energy within the DNA, specifically the mitochondrial DNA, because that's the looping DNA. That's the loop. If you look at the DNA, that's not the spiral, that's the loop. They slowed that down, and there is a consequence. There's a reason for that, and there is a specific consequence. So they have literally were able to engineer into our DNA to code messages, but also to make certain changes. I argue that what they did is they collapsed our DNA, which in my eyes to begin with would have been a spiral, would have been like a spiral, kind of the same effect like you see within any for example, the rose structure, any pentagram, if you kind of spin it fast enough, it becomes a spiral. They collapsed it into the 12-stranded DNA, the dodecahedron. And the dodecahedron as a sort of specific shape is not present anywhere in nature. It's nowhere in nature, but the spiral is, because we have the spiral galaxies, right? We have the spiral within our eye. We have that. That's a part of nature, and that's part of that sort of, from microcosm to macro and microcosm. Everything is a fractal, but not the dodecahedron. And our DNA, if you ask the scientists, they will tell you, oh, it's a dodecahedron. It's the shape, sort of how the helices are specifically built. It's a dodecahedron. That's a false artificial structure. So to me, what they've done is they have collapsed our DNA shape, and including the vortex, that's the snake moving fast, okay, to move slow, and it collapsed from a spiral into dodecahedron. If this is too much, please watch my other podcast, because this might be too convoluted. But to answer, that's what they did, and there's a very, very significant effect of that, because it basically meant that we have lost a lot of our abilities, a lot of abilities that we used to have. Being the fact that we age. That's a result of that. The fact that we cannot just regenerate our bodies. That's a result of that. So what can we do? Are we doomed? No, we are not doomed. But they have designed this matrix in a very tricky way, which is if you still remain looped and in the programming, you will not be able to activate the DNA. If you remain looped and in trauma, especially in the lowest vibrational emotions of shame and guilt, which is the lush, which is the favorite food, right? You're not going to be able to start the vortex back up. So, and it's not an intention work. It is literally, this is why the collapse is so important. And this is why the Gnostics are talking about the sacred fire and the collapse of the ego. It's not really psychological ego. It is the matrix hooks that needs to be out, because when they are out, you're coming back to the original blueprint of the human naturally, not because it's a healing intention, affirmation, or any other nonsense. No, because this is how we are designed naturally.
And for the audience, beyond checking Ola's work on DNA, check out past shows where we focus more on the Zodiac and the moon and all that. And yeah, quite a construct between DNA, the Zodiac, the moon, our society. It's seems overwhelming, but like you said, all it takes is that contact, and we've got them. But so much more. As we get to the end, Graham, do you have any last questions or remarks for Ola?
Just, she seems to echo a lot of what I've always gone with, which is, you don't go to the edge, you don't go to the extremes, you go to the middle. Everything in moderation, including moderation. As Dante showed in the Inferno, the way out of hell isn't to go to the edge, it's to go to the bottom and go through the mouth of the devil. That's where your escape lies. And, everything for me comes from that liminal space in between the two opposites, where I'm much more a fan of the Heros Gamos as the primary, the marriage of the male and female, rather than either male or female taking priority over the other. The marriage is what's the most important part to me. And I appreciate Ola's shining my light on a lot of stuff I need to explore. I appreciate it. Thank you, Ola.
Pleasure.
And I have it on the show notes, but where can people find out more about you, and what do you have? Do you have more events, the gateway events coming up, or?
Yes, absolutely. You can find me on both of my websites, selfmasteryquest.com and mysticalarcticjourneys.com. On the Mystical Arctic Journeys, you will see a bit of a recently revamped version of my events and getaways or gateways. Hey, I still have some options for October, open getaway for ladies only. Other than that, I also organize and offer individual experiences for either, as one person alone or a couple or sort of small group. That can be also arranged, and that only takes place here in north of Norway, Arctic Circle, Lofoten. Why? Because this is one of those very rare places in the world that you can still feel that raw signal leaking through the matrix architecture, and upon contact with that signal, it is the strike. And then I come and I help the strike too.
So there is an ancient shamanistic tradition where you reside right now.
I would, I think that I probably do not want to place myself in any tradition, because you do not have to be a shaman to strike. Sometimes it could be, you're a plumber that strikes you accidentally. So I think that, I think that all of us carry something inside of them. But I decided over the course of the last 3 years, as I have been working with it and offering things, I've just noticed that just talking and teaching about it is only doing so much. So now I've just started organizing more of a contact sort of circumstances, and that also includes not just the contact with the raw field, but also certain work that I do. Would I call it shamanic? Probably not purely because it has a bad connotation, because there's a lot of new age shamans out there, and I'm just not gonna stand in line with that nonsense.
Here. Awesome. Yes, well, we are at the end. I think I see a super chat from Mr. My friend Kevin Can. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. And yes, you'll be on my show next month to talk about some healing modalities from Platonic surrealism, but really appreciate the support. And glad to see everybody here. First, I'll say, Graham, thanks for keeping us company on this amazing journey.
No, always a pleasure. And I've learned a lot from Ola, and I look forward to learning more as I integrate a lot of what she's taught me. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Well, Ola, as always, it is great to talk to you, and it is great what you share with the world. And I don't know if anybody's gonna listen, right? But or most won't. But you just got to keep saying it, right?
Well, maybe talking is over. I think it's time for the
Action.
field to do the job.
Exactly. I think so too. Well, awesome. We'll keep doing what you're doing. I know I appreciate it, and it has helped me. And as always, thanks for coming on AM Bite.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And thank you to everyone in the chat. I was kind of having a look now and then. So really, thank you so much for your support. And thank you for watching. Thank you for your time. And to anyone who might be watching a replay later.
Well said. Yes. And for everybody, please have a good rest of your week. Keep writing your own gospel, living your own myth. And yes, definitely wake up, because the best is yet to come. All right, we are at the end. Exclusive show with James True should be next, and some other great shows heading off the end of July. But until then, take care, everybody.